Please rise as you are able for the reading of the Gospel. A reading of the Gospel of Mark, the 13th chapter. As Jesus came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." Then Jesus asked him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down." When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign that all these things are about to be accomplished?" Then Jesus began to say to them, "Beware that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and they will lead many astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place. But the end is still to come. For nations will rise against nations and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs." The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. Grace and peace to you from the one who is, who was, and who is to come. Hello, everyone, friends and members of the Graceville Hills Parish, and a special good morning to everyone at Piedmont Valley watching the sermon on Sunday. Soon it is Advent. Soon we are in that time where we remember again that we are still waiting for Christ's coming again. This time of waiting will lead into the end times. What will that look like? What will it look like when we get close, when time ends or the end time comes? The texts for today speak to us about these matters. In Hermosa, there is this sign. I don't know if you have seen it before. You can see it from the highway when you drive on 79. And the sign says, "Are you rapture ready?" ? As you can guess, the question is not about whether you have packed any bags, wrote your will, or turned off the stove. Let's see what our texts can actually tell us about this question. According to Jesus, in the Mark text, the end is neither immediately upon us, nor in the far distant future. Jesus describes it more like labor pains that repeat throughout time. What's interesting is that what Jesus describes here is a Christian version of classic Jewish apocalypticism. I took a class on this once, and it is fascinating. Sometimes a bit strange, but the core of the Jewish visions for what is to come at the end is what Jesus describes here too. Jesus is saying everything that appears to be stable, which includes the temple, even what religious truth means, the nation, the earth itself, all of it will be shaken to pieces. So, despite something appearing to be stable, despite its size and age, nothing will stand forever. In the text we read, as Jesus came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." What the disciple sees is power and importance because of the size of the buildings and the stones. I know the feeling the disciples feel here. Who hasn't experienced this feeling of awe when entering a space like a Capitol Rotunda or a grand cathedral? When you stare up at the ceiling and maybe also think, look at these large stones and buildings. The churches in Europe are often very old, huge, and elaborate in decorations and details. I remember the first time I went to St. Paul Cathedral in London. You actually have to pay quite a steep fee to go inside and walk around, and I was a poor student. So I attended Sunday worship service at the St. Paul's Cathedral, which of course was free. The beauty and the size of the cathedral was definitely distracting from the message. I looked around in awe, and I was fascinated by the stories that the paintings on the ceilings told. I guess you have to be a member for at least a few months before you can start paying attention to the pastor's message. For our disciples in the text, the temple in Jerusalem would have been the biggest building any of them had ever seen. No wonder they had that feeling of awe, too. But Jesus is not impressed by buildings, no matter how large they are. Many of the things people are impressed with do not really seem to matter to Jesus. He is showing us, don't bother with the buildings because they will fall. And this is better understood in the context of what comes before and after our Mark passage. Jesus has already pointed out the issues of the time and the place that he lives in. The Roman government and the temple leaders oppress the people. Widows are robbed of their living, their whole households are forced. So it will not last. It will all fall. And then following in the verses 9 to 13, so after our text, Jesus teaches the people how to live during the times of persecution. And he says, the good news, the gospel, must first be proclaimed to all nations. That's what Jesus is interested in. Proclaiming the good news to all in generosity, compassion, mercy, and grace. So the disciples' reaction to the buildings is a reminder of how easy it is to get distracted by the things of this world. And then ignore what's important, the greater gifts. These greater gifts are important and prominent in our other readings. Let's look at the Daniel text, which promises that God's life is more powerful than all suffering. The suffering of individuals or the community. God will make some shine and deliver them, words of promise and hope. God will send holy messengers to protect and care for God's people. Come what may in this life, God's promises endure. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is from Daniel, actually, and it talks about the reason why and what God is doing in our suffering. It is in Daniel 9, verse 18, where it says, "Incline your ear, O God, and hear. Open your eyes and see our despair. See how your city that bears your name lies in ruins. We make this plea, not because of our righteousness, but because of your mercy." What speaks to me so much in this verse is the sentiment, not our righteousness, but your mercy is what makes us ready. Incline your ear, listen. And St. Augustine tells us about this. The grace of God does not find people fit for salvation, but makes them so. The grace of God does not find people fit for salvation, but makes them so. This brings us lastly to our second reading, the Hebrews text. It fits well with the other two readings because it also predicts the end of all things and calls the Christian community to faith. Faith in God's salvation, God's grace, and mercy. Did you notice in the text the images of our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water? What does that remind you of? Baptism. Of course, baptism. At the beginning of the service, we gave thanks for our baptism. You are fit for salvation. God made it so. Forgiveness of sin, our hearts sprinkled clean. This invites us to let go. It invites us to stop trying to fix everything, to take on every burden, and to do everything right, or focus on material things or status. We are promised a freedom that invites us to be daring, to risk everything for the sake of the good news, the gospel, because we know that even when we don't get it right, when we don't get it all perfectly, and we won't, forgiveness and grace is still promised to us. Even at the end of everything you hold dear, everything that instills awe in you, and everything familiar, when it's all shaken to pieces, you don't have to worry. God will be there to meet you. Your purpose is tied to a steadfast love and commitment from God, because the grace of God does not find people fit for salvation, but makes them so. So what will you say when you drive past a sign asking you, "Are you rapture ready?" Amen? Amen.